The last thing the hatchlings heard before the ships left was silence, not the quiet kind. The kind that presses down on your chest like a stone. The kind that says, "No one is coming back." There were 5 of them. Rhine was the oldest by maybe 3 days. She had gray-green scales and a cracked left horn that had never grown straight. She was the one who pulled the others into the corner of the ruined outpost when the adult Dracarin had flown their ships out of the atmosphere without a single word, without looking back, without hesitating. Sola sat against the wall and said nothing. She was the thinker. Even at 3 weeks old, she processed before she spoke, and right now there was too much to process. The data implanted in their heads at birth, the Dracarin knowledge seed, given to every hatchling, had told them what they were. Apex predators, heirs to an empire that spanned 11 star systems, born to dominate. But the knowledge seed had not explained this. Brath was pacing. He was the biggest of them, already nearly a meter at the shoulder, with dark red scales and a temper that arrived before his thoughts did. He kept growling at the door, at the walls, at the sky, through the collapsed section of roof. His breath came out in short bursts of heat that scorched the floor. Neva was curled around the smallest one, Ket. She had pale silver scales and very large eyes, and she made a low sound in her throat that was not quite a word and not quite a cry. Ket was not moving much. Ket had not moved much since the second day. His breathing was shallow and wet and wrong. The outpost was on the moon of Drivos, a dead rock orbiting a dim orange star at the edge of Dracarine-controlled space. It had been a military relay station once. Now it was a broken shell of metal and crumbled stone, half buried in gray dust. There was no food. There was a small amount of water collecting in a crack in the floor from some deep underground source. Ryan had found it on the first day and rationed it carefully. She was 3 weeks old and already rationing water in a ruin on a dead moon. She did not think of it as brave. She thought of it as the only option. On the 4th day, Sola finally spoke. She said, very quietly, "They left us because of the resonance test." No one answered. They all knew. The knowledge seed had that too. Dracarin hatchlings were tested at 2 weeks for psionic resonance, the deep mental frequency that connected every Dracarin to the Empire's communication web, to their military coordination systems, to what the adults called the Great Hum. It was the mark of a true Dracarin. None of the 5 had it. The decree of purification had been law for 300 years. Defective stock was to be removed. The word used in official records was released. As if they were being set free, Brath finally stopped pacing. He sat down hard and said, "So we are broken. We breathe. We think. We are not broken," Ryan said. "Then what are we?" No one had an answer for that. On the 6th day, Ket stopped waking up for water. Neva stayed pressed against him and kept her body heat close. Her palms could produce small flames. She had discovered this by accident on day 2 when she was frightened. And she used that heat now, carefully, like she was afraid of burning something precious. On the 7th day, something appeared in the sky. It was not a Dracarin ship. The knowledge seed identified it after a moment. A human deep survey vessel, class 3, long range, crew of 12. The knowledge seed also noted that human ships had been classified as non-priority threats by the Dracarin High Conclave. Not worth engaging, not worth fearing. The ship descended slowly and landed about 400 meters from the outpost. Ryan moved the others back into the shadows. She crouched at the edge of the doorway and watched. The ship's ramp lowered. Figures came out, small by Dracarin standards, soft-looking, no scales, no natural weapons visible. They carried instruments. One of them, a thin man in a gray coat, was already crouching down and pressing a small device to the ground, scanning. They were heading toward the outpost. Ryan weighed her options. 5 hatchlings, 1 barely alive, all underfed. Against 12 humans with unknown equipment. Running was not possible. Ket could not be moved fast. Hiding was no longer possible. The scanner would find them. She straightened up. When the man in the gray coat stepped through the broken doorway and raised a light, Ryan was standing directly in front of him. Behind her, 4 pairs of eyes caught the beam and reflected it back like small fires in the dark. The man stopped. He did not reach for a weapon. He did not step back. He looked at her, then past her, at the others, then at Ket on the ground. His face changed. Not fear exactly. Something more complicated. He looked back at Ryan, she said, in flat galactic common, because the knowledge seed had given her that too. Stay away from us. He did not move. We are monsters, she said. The word tasted strange. That is what we were told, so stay away. The man crouched down, slowly, until he was at her eye level. Then he smiled. It was not a large smile, not triumphant, not the smile of something that had found prey. It was quiet, and a little sad, and very steady. He said, My name is Aldrich. What is wrong with the small one? Ryan stared at him. She had no answer ready for that. What the stars said. About humans, Aldrich did not wait for permission. He opened his kit, moved past Ryan, slowly, no sudden steps, and knelt beside Ket. He pressed 2 fingers lightly against the hatchling's neck, checked his breathing, looked at the color of the membrane around his eyes. His face stayed calm the whole time, the way someone looks when they are thinking hard but do not want to show worry. Ryan watched him with every muscle ready. Behind her, Brath had gone completely still, which was its own kind of warning. Sola had her head tilted. Neva had not moved from Ket's side, but her palms were lit, orange light flickering between her small fingers. Aldrich looked up at Neva. That heat, can you hold it steady? Not hotter, just steady. Neva blinked. No adult had ever spoken to her like a person before. She nodded once. Good. Keep doing that. He pulled something from the kit. A thin injector. He held it up so Ryan could see it clearly. This goes in his arm. It will help him fight the infection. He waited. He did not just do it. He waited for something, permission, maybe. Or at least the absence of a no. Rin looked at the injector. The knowledge seed had no data on human medical tools. She looked at Aldrich's face. She looked at Ket, who had not opened his eyes in 2 days. She stepped aside. Aldrich worked quietly. He gave the injection, wrapped a thin heated film around Ket's torso, and ran a small scanner along his spine. He hummed while he worked, a low, tuneless sound, just air through his teeth. It seemed unconscious, like he did not know he was doing it. Brath, after a long moment, said, Why are you making that sound? Aldrich glanced up, surprised. Humming? I do it when I concentrate. Sorry, it is strange, probably. He went back to work. Outside, voices, his crew. Captain Osi's voice, low and careful, telling someone to stay back. A louder voice. That was the security officer, Corsa, saying something about hull-rated claws. Aldrich called out without looking up. We are fine in here. Give us space. The voices dropped. Sola moved closer. She watched Aldrich's hands. You are not afraid. I did not say that. You do not act afraid. Being afraid and acting afraid are different things. He finished with the scanner and sat back. He should start responding within the hour. He needs water and something with protein in it. He looked around at the ruined outpost, the cracked floor, the thin trickle of water. His expression did not judge. It just took it in. How long have you been here? 7 days, Ryan said. He was quiet for a moment. Then, you kept them alive for 7 days. By yourself. There was no one else. He nodded slowly, not impressed in a loud way, just noting it. Ryan sat down across from him. She was tired of standing like she was about to fight. The knowledge seed has information about humans, she said. I know. We have information about Dracarin too. What does it say? He considered. Short-lived, stubborn, difficult to reason within groups, but surprisingly functional in small ones. High rate of irrational behavior driven by emotion. He paused. Also, responsible for 42 different varieties of fermented food and drink, which we seem very proud of. Brath made a sound. It was almost a laugh. He looked confused by it. What does ours say about you? Aldrich asked. Ryan answered honestly, that you are soft, that you break easily, that the Conclave chose not to conquer your space because the cost was not worth the prize. That last one is accurate, Aldrich said without offense. Sola said, the data also says humans are inventive. It is listed as a threat assessment. Also accurate. He glanced at the door. My captain is going to want to come in soon. She is patient, but she has limits. Before she does, what do you want to do? You do not have to come with us. I can leave supplies. But, he looked around again, this place will not hold for long, and I do not think anyone else is coming. The hatchlings looked at each other. That specific silence passed between them, the one that had no language yet, but would eventually become something like, "We have no other option, and we know it, and we are all afraid to say so out loud," Rin said. "What do you want from us?" He picked up his kit and stood. "Right now, for you to eat something and sleep somewhere warm." She stared at him. That was not the answer a predator gave. That was not the answer of something that wanted to use them, study them, trade them, or report them to the Conclave in exchange for safe passage. She searched his face for the lie behind it. She found nothing, not because he was hiding it well, but because it did not seem to be there. Ket made a small sound. His eyes opened, pale yellow, unfocused, blinking. Neva made a sound that was not quite a word and pressed her forehead to his. He blinked again. His tail moved. Aldrich watched this. Then he walked to the doorway and said quietly to the outside, "Captain, they are coming out. Easy posture, everyone. No fast movements." Rin stood. She looked at the others. Brath was still suspicious. Sola was still watching everything. Neva was already gathering Ket carefully into her arms. Rin walked out first. The moon's pale light hit her scales. 7 humans stood in a loose half-circle. Not a wall, not a barrier. Just people standing. One of them, a tall woman with steady eyes, stepped forward. "I am Osi," she said. "You are safe here." Ryan had been told many things by adults. She had been told what she was, what she lacked, what she was worth. No one had ever said that before. She did not believe it yet. But she filed it away, carefully. The weight of what they are, the ship, smelled like metal and something warm that turned out to be bread. Thomas, the engineer, had baked it. He baked bread when he was nervous, which meant the crew had been eating a lot of bread since the hatchlings came aboard. He was a broad, quiet man who communicated mostly through food and single-syllable sentences. And somehow, this made him the first crew member that Brath stopped growling at. It happened on day 9. Brath had crushed a door frame by accident. He was growing fast. They all were, faster than expected, now that they were eating properly. And he stood there staring at the bent metal with something between fury and shame. Tomas walked up, looked at the frame, said, went and got a wrench, and started fixing it. He did not comment. He did not report it. When Brath, after a long silence, said, "I will try not to do it again," Tomas said, "Yup," and kept working. They had been aboard the Ardent Compass for 2 months. Ket had recovered fully. He was the smallest, but he was quick in the mind especially, and he had discovered the ship's archive on day 3 and had not stopped reading since. He read everything. Biology, history, human literature. He sat in the archive bay for hours, with his tail wrapped around the chair legs and his nose close to the screen. Sola read too, but differently. She read the way a person checks a wound, needing to know, but also afraid of what she would find. On day 31, she found the war records. The full ones. Not the summaries. The actual casualty counts from the 3 major Dracaran campaigns into human border space. Planets. Numbers. Names of settlements that no longer existed. She came to find Aldrich in the small lab where he kept his work. She stood in the doorway and said, "Our kind did this." He did not look surprised. He put down what he was holding. "Yes, all of it. I read it all. I know those records." She came in and sat across from him. "How can you not hate us?" He was quiet for a moment, not avoiding the question, thinking about it honestly. "I have met exactly 5 Dracaran in my life," he said. "You 5, I judge who is in front of me. That is not logical. Maybe not. But hating you for what other Dracaran did would be like hating Ket for a war that happened before he hatched." He picked up his work again. "You did not do those things. You were thrown on a dead moon because of a test you could not pass. Those are different facts." Sola sat with that for a while. Meanwhile, Reen was in the observation deck with Ose. This had become a quiet habit. Osi would come up in the evenings to look at the star maps, and at some point, Ryan had started coming too, and neither of them had spoken about it or made it official. They just both appeared there, in the dark, looking out at the same stars. Ryan asked one night, "The other crew members are afraid of us. Some of them. Yes, Corsa is afraid of most things. That is why she is good at her job. She is right to be afraid. We will keep growing. In 2 years, we will be larger than this ship's cargo bay. OC considered this. Then we have 2 years to give her better reasons than fear. Ryan looked at her. You speak as though you have already decided to keep us. I already decided on day 1, when I saw Aldrich's face after he came out of that outpost. She paused. He had that look he gets when something matters. He is strange. He is the best person I know. She said it plainly, with no drama, the way you say a fact. Ryan turned back to the stars. Her people's stars. Somewhere out there was the Conclave, the High Council, the Empire that had made her and then decided she was not worth keeping. She asked the question without meaning to. Are we monsters? OC did not answer immediately. The silence stretched long enough that Ryan almost regretted asking. Then OC said, that is not a question I can answer for you. And you should be careful of anyone who tries to. That is not an answer. No. It is a direction. The answer is something you build, not something someone gives you. Neva asked the same question 3 nights later, in the engine room at the end of Corsa's night shift, because Neva had started keeping Corsa company during those long quiet hours, and Corsa, who had argued loudest against bringing them aboard, had stopped protesting Neva's presence somewhere around week 3. Corsa looked at her hands for a moment. Then she said, the things that worry me about you have nothing to do with monsters. What worries you then? That you will grow up and the galaxy will treat you like weapons, and you will not know how to refuse it. Neva thought about that for a long time. She lit a small flame in her palm and looked at it. I think I already know how to refuse things, she said quietly. I did not burn Aldrich when he reached past me to help Ket. I wanted to. I was afraid, but I held still. Corsa looked at her. That is a choice, Neva said. Corsa said nothing. But the next morning, she stopped sitting on the opposite side of the table at meals. She did not make an announcement about it. She just moved. Humans were strange that way. They changed their minds quietly, without ceremony, and expected you to notice without them having to say it. Brath noticed. He told Ryan. Ryan told the others. None of them knew what to make of it, but all of them filed it away, carefully. The galaxy watches the data packet that leaked was 17 seconds long. No one ever found out who sent it. It contained only one thing. A clip from the Ardent Compass's internal observation feed, timestamped from month 2 aboard the ship. In it, Ket was sitting in the archive bay, surrounded by 3 crew members. A young engineer's assistant named Pol, the medic Ren, and Tomas, who had brought bread, and they were all laughing at something on the screen. Ket's tail was wagging. He did not seem to know it was wagging. His whole back half was moving with it in 17 seconds across 41 star systems. That clip reached approximately 900 million screens. The Dracaran Conclave's response arrived at the Ardent Compass 8 hours later. Formal. Cold. 3 sentences. The defective stock belonged to the Empire. Return or face censure. The word stock appeared twice. OC read it, set it aside, and sent the ship toward the nearest neutral station. Harrow's Point, a mid-sized trading hub at the border of 4 different species territories. She did not answer the Conclave's message. She would wait for the assembly. The assembly took 4 days to respond, which was fast for a body of that size. The answer was hold position. Debate was ongoing. The vote was close. Harrow's Point was not designed for large diplomatic situations, but it had a central hall that could fit most of what gathered over the following week. The Vilhari came first. The insectoid traders, clicking and chirping, sending their senior negotiator, a being called Fetch of Four Wines, who arrived in a shimmering shellcoat and immediately asked OC for a copy of Ket's 17-second clip for their cultural archive. They said nothing about the politics. They were simply curious, in that pure Vilhari way, about whether the clip was an isolated event or a pattern. The Morn Collective arrived as a single physical representative, a gray, soft-spoken entity named Stillwater, but it spoke for over 1 billion connected minds. It stood in the corner of the station lounge and said very little. But it watched the hatchlings with an attention so total that Sola said it felt like being read. The Grethkai sent 3 observers. The Grethkai had been Dracaran vassals for 80 years and had only recently shaken that off. They watched the Conclave's ships, which had appeared on long-range sensors 2 days in, and they watched the human assembly's hesitation, and they were very careful not to say out loud what they were thinking. But they did not leave. The hatchlings had continued growing. Ryan now stood at the shoulder of the tallest human on the station. Brath was broader. Sola had developed a second set of sensory organs along her jaw that no standard Dracaran possessed. The defect, it seemed, was growing into something else. Neva's flame had graduated from her palms to a controlled field she could project about half a meter in any direction. Ket was still the smallest, but he had started finishing other people's sentences, and not because he was guessing. On the 3rd day at Harrow's Point, a Dracaran diplomat arrived. Not a soldier. A diplomat, thin, older, with formal coloring on his scales that indicated high rank. He requested a meeting. Osi allowed it in the central hall, with observers present. He looked at the 5 hatchlings and called them, in Dracaran, wasted potential made embarrassing by circumstance. Brath moved. He crossed the hall in 2 steps. He was now large enough that the humans in the room felt the floor shift. He stopped directly in front of the diplomat, close enough that the diplomat had to tilt his head back, and his scales had gone deep red, the color Ryan had learned to call dangerous. He did not breathe fire. He did not strike. He said, very quietly, "Say it again. Use that word again. I want to hear you say it to my face one more time." The diplomat said nothing. Ryan stepped up beside Brath and put one hand on his shoulder. Not holding him back, she could not have held him back if she tried. Just placing her hand there. He felt it. His scales slowly shifted from red toward brown. "We are done here," Ryan said to the diplomat. Flat. Finished. The diplomat left. Fetch of Four Winds clicked something to its assistant. The translation came back as, "The red one controlled itself. The gray one controlled the red one," with words. This is very interesting. That evening, Ket was in the observation lounge when Stillwater drifted in and stood nearby. After a while, Ket said, without looking up, "You have been deciding something." Stillwater said, "Our collective was uncertain how to understand what you are. We do not fully understand it ourselves. That is the answer we needed." A pause. "The Conclave calls you defective. But you are the first Dracaran in 300 years to resolve a confrontation with language. Our records show no other instance." Ket's tail moved. He looked at the stars through the glass. Then he said, to no one in particular, and to everyone listening through Stillwater's connection, "Our people say monsters are born. The humans say monsters are made by choices. I have been watching both sides of that argument for 2 months." He paused. "I think I know which one is right." He did not know Stillwater was recording. By morning, it was in 340 languages. The Conclave sent one more message. This one did not say stock. This one said, "Send an arbiter." Osoi read it. She called the hatchlings together. She told them plainly what was coming, not to frighten them, but because she had made a habit of telling them the truth, and she was not going to stop now. Ryan listened. Sola ran numbers in her head. Brath cracked 2 of his own knuckles and said nothing. Neva's flame flickered once, then steadied. Ket looked up from the archive screen where he was still reading and said, "Good, we have things to say." What a kneeling human started the High Arbiter's name was Vorath, and he was 400 years old. His scales were the color of deep ice, pale gray blue, the kind that only came with extreme age. And he moved the way very powerful things move when they no longer need to prove anything. He brought 6 warships. He entered Harrow's Point alone, because bringing soldiers inside would have been beneath him, and Vorath was precise about what was beneath him. The central hall had been rearranged. Every faction that had gathered at Harrow's Point was present. The Velhari in their shellcoats, the Grethkai observers in a tight group near the back, Stillwater in the corner, the human assembly's 2 representatives standing straight-backed near Osei. Crew members from the Ardent Compass lined one wall, Tomas with his arms folded, Corsa with her hand not quite near her sidearm, Aldrich standing slightly apart with the look of a man doing arithmetic in his head. The 5 hatchlings stood together in the center. Voreth looked at them for a long time without speaking. His face was the face of someone trying to find something familiar and failing. He had seen defective hatchlings before, usually from a distance, already removed. He had never seen ones that had grown for 2 months on a human ship. They were not what the record said they would be. He addressed OC first, as the ranking human. His galactic common was perfect and very old. You are in violation of Conclave Property Code, Section 4, the Decree of Purification. The items you have harbored belong to. They are not items, Rin said. Every sensor in the room picked up the shift, not in temperature, in the quality of the silence. Vorath turned to look at her with the slow precision of someone who has never been interrupted in a very long time. Rin did not step back. You called us stock in your first message. Your diplomat called us wasted potential. In your own records, we are listed under biological assets, non-viable. We have read those records. We have read all of them. She paused. My name is Rin. This is Sola, Brath, Neva, and Ket. We are not items. You may address us, or you may leave, but you will not speak around us as though we are not in the room. Voreth's gaze moved over the 5 of them. Old eyes. Very old. You have been taught to speak like this by humans. We have been taught to speak by humans, Sola said, stepping forward. Not like this. What we say is our own. She pulled out a data pad, a human one, thin and plain. 400 years of Dracaran genetic records. Public archive, all of it. I have been running analysis for 6 weeks. She held it up. The psionic resonance frequency your conclave tests for began narrowing 80 years before the purification decree was passed. Since the decree, the narrowing has accelerated. You are removing the variation that keeps a species adaptable. She let that land. The trait you call a defect is divergence. It is how species survive change. You have been sterilizing your own future for 300 years. The hall was very quiet. Vorath said, You cannot know this. The data is in your own archive. I found it in a human library. Sola's voice did not waver. It was filed under non-priority xenobiology. Apparently, humans were curious about why your population numbers were declining. Vorath looked at the datapad. He did not reach for it. Something in his expression moved. Too small and too fast to read. Niva stepped forward. She was the gentlest of them, the one who moved like she was always aware of what she might accidentally break. She walked up to Vorath until she was closer than was expected, and looked up at him the way someone looks at something very high that they are not afraid of. She asked, Were you ever frightened? When you were small? The question landed somewhere unexpected. Vorath's expression, controlled for 4 centuries, did something small and unplanned. His eyes moved. Not away. Down. Just down. The silence lasted 11 seconds. Every recording device in the room captured it. Brath moved last. He walked to stand beside Rhine and faced Vorath, and said the thing he had been holding since day 7 on a dead moon, since the silence that pressed down like a stone, since the sound of Dracaran ships going up through the atmosphere without looking back. You left us to die because we were different from you, he said. His voice was not loud. Loud would have been easier to dismiss. It was quiet and even and full. You called it the purification. You gave it a name that sounds clean. And a human, one human, walked into a broken building on a dead moon and knelt down in the dirt to save the smallest one of us. He did not ask who we were. He did not check if we were useful. He just knelt down. Brath's eyes were steady on Vorath's. I will live for hundreds of years. I will spend every one of them making sure the galaxy remembers which one of you was the monster. Vorath stood still for a very long time. Then he said, to no one in particular, in a voice that had lost most of its formal structure, the Assembly's charter claim stands uncontested. He turned. My ships will withdraw to the boundary. He walked out of the hall without looking at the hatchlings again. It was not a surrender exactly. It was something older than surrender. It was the moment when a very old thing realizes it has been wrong for a very long time and does not yet know how to say so. Fakafar Winds clicked rapidly to its assistant. Translation. Remarkable. The gray-blue one left. No blood, no fire, only words, data, a question, and a memory. Ozzy stood beside Aldrich. She said quietly, "You started this." He looked at her. "I just asked about the small one. That is what I said. You started this." The answer Ket's book was called What I Read in the Dark, and it was 412 pages long. He did not write it to be famous. He wrote it because Aldrich had told him once, during a late night in the archive bay when both of them were reading and the ship was quiet, that writing something down was how you made sure it survived you. Ket thought about that for a long time. Then he wrote the book. It covered everything. The moon, the water in the crack in the floor, Neva's palms, the smell of Tomas's bread, the 17 seconds of footage that crossed 900 million screens, still water in the corner of the station lounge, Voreth's 11 seconds of silence. He wrote it in 3 languages. Galactic Common, Dracaran Formal, and a human language called English that he had taught himself from the archive, because he liked the way it made him slow down and choose exactly the right word. It sold poorly for the first 8 months. Then a Grethkai teacher assigned it to a class of young students. Then a Velhari academic cited it in a paper about cross-species moral development. Then it was simply everywhere, the way things become everywhere when the right moment finds them. The 5 hatchlings did not stay together after Harrow's Point. This was deliberate. They had talked about it among themselves for weeks before the decision was made. Rin said 5 Dracaran traveling together would be seen as a unit, a force, a faction. 5 Dracaran going 5 different directions would be seen as people. Ren joined the Interstellar Independent Diplomatic Council, not the human one, not the Dracaran one, but the small, underfunded, genuinely neutral body that had existed for 60 years and been largely ignored. She worked border negotiations between the Grethkai and a smaller species called the Pelori, who had been in a low-grade resource dispute for decades. She was good at it because she understood what it felt like to be told you were not worth the cost. Sola took a research post at a joint university on the human Velhari shared station of Coppermark. She published her genetic analysis formally 18 months after Harrow's Point, peer-reviewed, complete, in 4 languages. 3 Dracaran academics publicly disputed it. 7 quietly sent her requests for the raw data. Brath, to the surprise of everyone including himself, became a first contact specialist. He said, when asked, "I know what fear looks like in a new species, because I have been the frightening thing in the room. I know what it takes to not use the fear." He was patient in the field in a way that no one who had seen him crack doorframes would have predicted. He attributed this entirely to Tomas. Naiva opened what she called, simply, a listening practice. She saw individuals, not patients exactly, not clients, just individuals who needed to speak and be heard without being judged. Her first clients were 3 Grethkai who had grown up under Dracaran occupation and had no word in their language for what they had experienced. Her waiting list was 2 years long. Within the first month, Ket wrote the book. The ceremony at which they said goodbye to the Ardent Compass was attended by no one outside the 7 people who mattered. The 5 hatchlings, Ose, Corsa, Tomas, Ren, Pol, and Aldrich. 11 people total, no speeches. Tomas had made bread, which he placed on a table, and people ate it. And that was the ceremony. Rin stood in front of Aldrich when it was time. She was taller than him now by a significant amount. Her gray-green scales had deepened in color. Her cracked horn had not grown straight. It never would. But she had stopped thinking of it as a flaw some months back, and she was not sure exactly when. She said, "You knelt down." That was all. And it changed everything. Aldrich looked up at her. He had the same expression he'd had in the ruined outpost doorway. Quiet, a little sad, very steady. He shrugged with one shoulder. It seemed like the right height to talk to someone. He said years passed. Aldrich retired from fieldwork and taught xenobiology at a university on the edge of human space. He was a poor lecturer and an extraordinary mentor, which turned out to be exactly what was needed. The Dracaran Reform faction announced publicly in the 4th year after Harrow's Point that they were calling for the end of the Purification Decree. They cited Sola's research. They cited Ket's book. They cited 11 seconds of silence from a 400-year-old arbiter who had returned home and said nothing for 3 months and then called for a conclave review. Vorath did not attend the review. He sent a letter. No one published the full contents. But one line from it passed through the galaxy the same way 17 seconds of footage had once done. The line was, "I was wrong. That is sufficient." In the 7th year, a new clutch of defective hatchlings was found on a moon much like Dravos. The first ship to respond was a human survey vessel. The second ship, arriving 40 minutes later, was Rhine's. She had repainted it herself, gray-green, with a small, irregular mark near the prow that looked like a cracked horn if you knew what you were looking at. The third ship arrived 2 hours after that. It bore no human markings and no conclave insignia. Its hull carried the symbol of the Reform faction. A new thing, uncertain and unfinished, still figuring out what it was. The 3 crews met at the ramp and looked at each other. Then they went inside together to find the hatchlings. The hatchlings had asked if they were monsters. The answer, in the end, was written not in what they were born, but in what they chose, and in the memory of a human who did not reach for a weapon, but bent his knee to meet 5 frightened creatures in the dark, and smiled. It was, as these things go, a very small gesture. It was also the thing that changed everything.